Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology, and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com.
Okay, and it's the last episode of the year. Good to see you in person again, Steve.
Always good.
Good in good old Adelaide, as we normally do at this time of the year. Now, normally we do like a bit of a retrospective of the year, wrap up type of thing. But I thought this year, because we're so concerned about it, we've been discussing it offline for so long. Just have a discussion around the algorithm and its effects on society, and just some things that we've been thinking about more generally, because I've been thinking about it a lot, and I don't know, maybe recent historical events or whatever, the way things have been playing out, the way we've all been subsumed by social media and its impacts. For some people, it's had certain impacts. We were talking before we got on today about how maybe we don't necessarily jump down the rabbit hole that quickly. Is that an innate thing? Is it something that is more predicated for some people to want to go down there? All that sort of stuff. So it's kind of interesting. But maybe where I wanted to start, and I should have asked you this before we started, but there's a movie that I rewatched yesterday called Don't Look Up on Netflix. I'm not sure if you've seen it, but highly recommend it to anyone that hasn't. But essentially, it's obviously providing a comedic take on the current state of society. Really, obviously the conceit being that a planet-killing comet is on its way to Earth, and it deals with how people respond to it. Now, normally it would be, the planet gets together and wants to respond, but in this particular movie, they're kind of suggesting that nobody can agree whether the comet's real or not, because whatever the algorithm's telling them, and they just basically can't get it together, and it ends with the planet being destroyed because they just can't figure out a solution, which is kind of a metaphorical thing, I think, for what's going on right now in society. But so yeah, I had a good laugh rewatching it, and I just had a lot of fun with it. But it does kind of highlight to me something a bit more serious about what's going on in the world today. And look, that was made back in 2021. I think obviously the algorithm in its various forms have been developing for a long time now, but we're getting to a point, and I'll get to another point that I want to make about this in a minute, where we're just accepting what it's telling us and almost being too lazy to maybe go out and search for our own stuff, to the point where it's just going to keep feeding us and we just keep swallowing it.
Oh, definitely. And, just case in point, you go back 20 years before the mobile phones, asteroid coming towards the planet, and, of course, everyone bands together and Bruce Willis saves us in Armageddon. So, yeah, it's definitely a very different world now. People rave about AI and what's going to happen with AI in the future, but the fact is it's already here, and it's the AI in the algorithms effectively that run our socials and our feeds. And it's those feeds through which I think increasingly we perceive the world around us. We perceive the threats and the joys and everything else in between. And it's those threats that seem to be very keenly felt on the socials. It's what gives us conspiracies. It's what gives us, I guess, some of the particular social movements or ways of thinking. And I think increasingly, and this has been spoken about now for years, the echo chamber, it's the focusing of those thoughts and leading, I think, people to start to perceive the world in ways that it may not actually be. It might be a little bit bigger, broader, and a little bit safer than some people think.
Absolutely. Actually was... we can take it as homework for all of us, maybe, as something to try that's a little bit different. So I was kind of alluding to this idea that we're lazy and just allowing the algorithm to feed us content that we then just consume, and then it just gives us more content, and then it kind of narrows our focus, in terms of what we think we like. The algorithm tells us what we like, which then feeds back on itself. But I just wonder if there's an argument that we can't. I mean, yeah, you could unplug yourself and go to a log cabin and don't look at a screen for months on end.
Wise idea.
Which is not entirely, something something you might want to consider. But another thing is, if you've still got your devices, you're still enjoying your content or whatever, maybe you can be a bit more active in the way that you go about finding content to watch. And it sounds like it might be simple, but if you think back to pre-algorithm days, you would actively seek out content to watch. So maybe instead of letting the algorithm feed you content, maybe you start to think yourself about the content that you might want to seek out and watch, and actually deliberately go in there and manually find it, like through a search function on YouTube or whatever, and try to find different types of content rather than just hitting the refresh button on the feed and then going from there.
It's a good point, but I would be interested in knowing whether you can really do that anymore. I think even using manual search functions these days is probably just a slower version of serving up the same content that you get automatically through an algorithm. It's getting much harder. I spend a lot of time on a variety of search engines just playing with them to see if I can get around, what the algorithm will serve for me. Now, bearing in mind that in a lot of ways, each of us have personalised search engines, and Google's a good example. They take a lot of data and historical data and serve on that basis. And so one of the things I like to do, everyone's got to have a hobby. You're on Google and you'll search for something and you'll get a very standard response, or the mainstream sort of, response that applies to your sort of interest base. How do you use language to get around that? And I find that very interesting. The other thing that I'd also bring up on that, Ben, which I find interesting and you might have some insight on, is, they're talking now increasingly Google is being threatened by AI because we can just ask Copilot or one of those ChatGPT what I should be looking for. And
well, there's something to that because, and I'm sure that in that competitive space on their end, that ChatGPT would love to take over Google search in terms of that, and you could potentially. I mean, it could be like it could turn around that quickly as well. I mean, Google was obviously late 90s that it came in and very quickly came to dominate search in general. So you could potentially see a ChatGPT or competitor rise up in the space and actually take over the search function, because ChatGPT in a way can be used as a search function, and they have rolled out a dedicated search function now, even in the free tier of the app. But at the same time, it's a variation, isn't it? It's it might be feeding you a more personalized response in terms of how it responds to you, but then you'd probably want to look into how is it actually getting the information, etc. in the same way.
It's quite interesting. So Google is still very much aimed at web pages and web-based, destinations, I think is the way to term it. Whereas ChatGPT, if you ask it the same question, and bearing in mind Google's incorporating Gemini to try and
do the same thing,
do similar answers. But if you use ChatGPT, it will give you a more general knowledge background, which of course is generally correct in so much as the topic you're searching on is factual on the internet.
It's only as good as the data it's trained itself on. It is only as good
as the data it's trained itself on, exactly. And thankfully, in most cases, it's Wikipedia, but there's plenty of other sources out there that aren't so factual. So, I think even now our knowledge base is thinning, and with each AI iteration, in fact, you're getting an even narrower perspective.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's a little bit of a worry to me, like that, just going back to that idea of actually manually searching things for yourself, which is what we used to have to be able to do to find anything. Even if you were to, even go back into the early days, 90s or whatever, that you had to have that component in your head to actually manually go and search for things, which I think is what is breaking in a way in the social media algorithm era, is that it's very easy. Maybe it's like a part of human complacency to be a little bit lazy, and this fancy new tool can do something for you. You're more than willing to outsource that for you, and I just wonder, as with the eye towards the future, looking towards 2025 and beyond, that's where it starts to become, you start to be a bit concerned about that it's not so much that, yes, it's losing the ability to do that, but it's through hacking, like not a flaw, but it's easy to be lazy rather than, actively working towards something, if that makes sense in terms of human nature.
True, but we've spoken about this a lot. So, content online is becoming derivative because the algorithms are derivative. And, so really I think, and this has been raised with AI as well, AI is not creative. No. It's basically historical. So it's just a regurgitation of historical. That's right. So with this, you're seeing, a singularity approaching where you start to get, and this is reflected in some, I guess, in some groupings on the internet where you have like very fixed ways of thinking, whether they're political or any other cause-based sort of, I guess, point of view, and they become entrenched, and it gets fed to you, and it ggets fed to you over and over again until you start to agree with it. And then I think that's where probably the problems occur.
But it's almost like then it's the self-perpetuating loop of you're being indirectly directed in your thinking, which that's when you really should be starting to get concerned.
It's it's not a word I like, but it's good usage here, which is you're being continually triggered.
Yeah.
And you respond appropriately.
Absolutely. All right. Well, just to finish up, I guess, it's going to be a big year next year. A lot of interesting changes in the world. I don't see any slowing down of anything of what we've been talking about anytime soon.
It's only going to speed up from here.
Absolutely, and I think it's probably a good time for us to reflect anyway, because I remember we've actually been talking about this in one way, shape, or form for years now, and we've kind of flagged where is this going, and I think we've even going back 9-10 years, close to when we started it, I think we were even talking about this, because it's been sowing the seeds for so many years, and now we're starting to get to a point, whether or not we're there yet for next year or the year after or whatever, there could be some interesting changes afoot.
Well, yeah, the thing that we're certainly on a trajectory that hasn't changed in the last 15 years. I think now we're rapidly approaching peak.
That's an interesting, in so many ways. Like, it just kind of boggles the mind and makes you concerned. But I also wonder whether or not, as with anything, in the long arc of human history, whether there's a curveball in there as well that we didn't see coming.
There always is.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Steve, we might wrap it up there for the year. It's been an interesting 2024. Good to do it in the old hometown again. And
always good to have you back. Yeah.
Absolutely. We're going to chill out for the year and just relax, and we'll be back with bells on in the year. I'm sure we will, right?
We will.
Absolutely. All right. That's it for this episode and for the year. We'll catch you next time.